Right, so here we've got Dan Gurney's Castrol Reynard. It's a Revell kit. This is a Revell of USA because white's got this funny box. It's also got made in the USA on there. 1999. This is All-American Races, 1/25th scale, blah, blah, blah. This is from the Championship Auto Racing Teams series, which is now defunct because of the Indy Split. You can see some information on the side here. The box is not in very good condition. More information on the side here. And this kit has been started. I bought it second hand. So, for instance, yeah, I've got tyres. This engine and rear suspension part has already been put together, and the glue has gone yellow, so needs to all be painted over. Got part of the bodywork, including the seat here, which has been painted. The inside of that has been painted. There's more glue here. No paint on the outside though, and some seams which will need to be sanded down. The floor, and we've also got the driver who's been assembled, and I want to say the face has actually been painted quite well. So yeah, I might try and keep that, but then lots of bits in other places that need to be painted. We've got the oval low downforce wing there, and we've got two versions of the rear wing. We've got the road course nose and front wing that's been removed. Got the wheels and some little studs there. I think those are the wing mirrors, so those are still on here. Got the other covering of the side pod. You can see that one's been taken out of there. Yeah, most parts have been removed from this. Just got the pedals and those little suspension parts. More suspension parts. Some disc brakes there. Little winglets here and intakes. But yeah, a lot of parts have been removed, including everything from this sprue. And then in this one here, we've got the little aero screen there, and we've also got the driver's visor. So I'm going to keep those in there to keep them safe. So I'm going to try and sand down this seam in the middle, try and remove it. The instructions, the decal sheet hopefully is still okay. It's a bit stiff. I might try taking off a decal that I'm not going to use to test, see how this goes. So fingers crossed with those. Then you've got the instructions here. Driver, nice for it to have a driver. Body there. A lot of this stuff has already been done, of course. These bits here. Wheels. Choice. Final assembly. And then you've got the decals on the back. There are these small winglets which you need to add to the back of the side pod. Helpfully, there are some small grooves to show you exactly where they need to go, although I'd test fit the parts dry first, as it's not quite clear how these go together. There we are. After assembling these body parts, I then primed and painted them in white from Tamiya. Then masked off this section of the nose cone and then painted the front wings in Park Green from Tamiya. This was a spray can, but I had the colour in a spray can, so I figured it was a pretty good match for Castrol Green. This section's much smoother after sanding down the seam. Found that putting the decals in some warm water and then using a craft blade to peel up one of the edges worked pretty well, and generally speaking they weren't too bad. However, I did need quite a lot of decal solution as they didn't have much flex in them. Number 36 was Dan Gurney's signature number. However, I do quite like that this is a Castrol Toyota with 36. It reminds me of the Tom's team in Japan. Then using some Mr. Mark Softer over that, and then I also used a hairdryer. Now the inside of this roll hoop was painted black already, and then there's a decal to go over the top. You could just paint this yourself though, instead of using the decal. As I said before, they'd already started assembling and painting the driver. The face looked pretty good. I used some Revell acrylics to finish off this, and I painted the belts before adding the decals to the front. First putting down some Mr. Mark Setter. There's also decals on the arms. It's good that they've added this, but it does need quite a bit of softening solution to go around the belts. Again, I used a hairdryer on a low speed setting, although be very careful with these decals, as I did lose this one on the arm, found it later on. And then once that had dried, I left it for a day. I then painted over the top of the belts with some more Revell matte black. There we are, pretty happy with that. Then he used some Revell aluminium for the waist buckle, and this silver Posca paint pen with a thin nozzle for the shoulder sort of straps. And some more seatbelt decals. And when these had cured, I went over the torso with some matte clear. More decals for the bodywork here. I looked up Degree, learned that it's a brand of deodorant. Not sure if it's still being used. I have to say, the logo here looks a little bit like washing powder. This car was driven by American driver Alex Barron in his rookie season. There's his name there. And it was powered by Toyota. Denso there, who are still quite a prominent partner of Toyota. And of course this was in the period where all Toyota race cars seemed to be sponsored by Castrol. Again, a bit of setting solution and then a wet cotton bud to remove any of the air pockets. These ones fit really nice onto the side. You'll also see a very small green dash which goes in the inside of the vent. More setting solution to make sure that that adheres nicely, and some decals on the side, including on this little winglet. Now this Castrol decal should actually go down over the gap and the bottom of the side pod, but I decided not to do that because I wouldn't be able to clear coat that part at the same time. Now I decided for the sake of the nose art I would join this up now using a bit of Tamiya extra thin cement, and that will make putting the nose art on much easier. However, what I hadn't factored in was that whilst most of the decals were fine, all the yellow ones had cracked really badly. So as soon as I started trying to put this eagle nose art on, the yellow parts cracked completely. I tried to jigsaw them together, but every time I tried to smooth them down around the curves, they just cracked more and more. So I decided to remove them, and I don't like brush painting gloss paint, but I found that this Tamiya yellow matched really well, and I brushed some on. This actually went down really nicely and smoothly. It's by no means perfect, but I made the best of a bad situation. Now fortunately there were some other sort of eagle mouth decals which would go on the oval version, so I was able to put those over the top. And there's also these kind of grey feather decals which go along the side. Dan Gurney's car were usually called Eagles, so that's where this nose art comes from. Now once I'd matte clear coated the body of the driver, I then went on to the decals for the helmet, which had already been painted gloss white. Just like before, these needed a lot of softening solution. I actually used some UMP extra strong decal solution to help adhere these to the helmet. By no means perfect, and as well there should be a yellow section in the centre here, but the yellow decal broke. So instead I clear coated it, and then I went over the top here with this yellow Sharpie, which isn't perfect. I think it should have orange stripes on as well, but it's close enough. And there we have it, Alex Barron. And then once the lid was all cured, I then added the visor. It's nice that it's got this, because a lot of the Tamiya racing drivers I've built haven't come with visor parts. And there's a Toyota Sunstrip that goes around that. There we are, pretty happy with that. Pedals go in the bottom of the seat. And then you put him in sort of shoulders first, and then he stays in there without the need of any glue. Now the aero screen at the front of the car, certainly smaller than the one that I use now, has the wing mirrors attached, so I masked that all off and painted those gloss white. And then you've got some very small mirror parts in the back of that, which were mainly white, but with the rear section in silver. There we have it. And that fits really nicely just here in front of the cockpit. I used a tiny amount of foam safe superglue to fit that into place. Now the engine, rear suspension and these turbo parts were already glued together. I painted them semi-gloss black and then added some details in silver and red. However, you won't see any of these parts once it all goes together. You'll also see that most of the floor was painted black, but a few sections that join up to the body were painted gloss white. There was a little bit of complicated masking there. Now the seat is glued into the inside like so. I do recommend gluing this to get the position exactly right. And then, as I'd already added the nose cone, this clipped together like so. Added a small amount of cement around those parts and then held it tight. It's now time to test fit the side pod sections. These have to be sort of threaded in between the rear suspension to make sure that they fit nicely. And there's the other one. These parts of the body had all been gloss clear coated now in Tamiya LP9. I wasn't going to polish it. And disc brakes go on like so. These were painted in Revell silver and aluminium. The front ones are a little bit more complicated, as you need to add some vents to those. And you've got some additional parts for the front suspension. These all actually go in very nicely, although they are very fragile, so do be careful, especially when adding the wheels later on. I added some super glue to the inside of these to secure them into place, which meant I needed to be very careful not to accidentally touch the bodywork. I added a very thin beading of superglue along the outside there, and then a bit more along here, although not too thick a layer, so that the join was nice and tight. Just like before, threading it through the rear suspension. And then I held that in place to make sure that the bond was nice and secure. Now the wheels are each made of two parts. You've got this cross section here which needs to be removed, which I actually found quite difficult. Now they left a bit of mould points, but once the wheel is together you won't notice these at all, so don't worry too much about removing them. Sanded down the outside of the tyres by attaching them to the Dremel and running them on some sandpaper. Now these old vinyl tyres are very stiff and wouldn't go onto the rims, so I dunked them in some recently boiled water, and that made them much nicer and bendier. They were in there for about 30 seconds. Now make sure you get these around the right way. Look at the instructions. There's a sort of thin edge and a fat edge to the tyre, and if you get them in the wrong place then the tyre will not be flat on the outside. I found pushing them down like this helped, and there we have it. I'm just test fitting all those wheels. The front ones have got separate centre locking wheel nuts, which you'll add later. I painted the wheel nuts in gunmetal. I wasn't too worried about sanding them down too much, as I looked at these examples of Goodyear Eagles and you can still see the mould seam down the middle. Here are the decals to go onto those. Again, put down quite a bit of Mr. Mark Setter. Now I quite like these because they've got very faint lines on them, which actually really realistically depict the look of these late 90s Goodyear Eagles. There's the model ones, and here if you look at the F1 tyre I've got here, you can see those lines over the text. I always start with the outside of the markings, as if I was to ruin any of them accidentally, I'd be able to spare some off the inside of the tyres. But fortunately these all worked well. Some cracked, but I was able to piece them back together. Careful with the front ones, you don't want to break that suspension. And then I added a little bit of poly cement and put the centre locking wheel nuts in. Now the rear ones have got this metal axle. Thread that through carefully, you don't want to damage it. There you are. And the wheels just slot onto that. You could use some super glue if you wanted to, although I found with a bit of pressure from both sides these would stay on. There's then an intake which goes here at the back. Just reposition that. It's gloss white with some black on the inside. And then you've got two choices with the rear wing, either road or oval. I went with the oval one, obviously, painted red, and then you've got the 36 decals and Goodyear on those. Now I found that this fitment wasn't very good, so I needed to hold that in place for quite a while. I also used the squares on the cutting mat to line it up. And there we are, it's finished. This was a nice, quick and simple build, done to coincide the Indy 500 this weekend, although this one never drove at Indianapolis. I'm not going to do a BOAB score as this one had already been started, but yeah, it says level 2 on the box, and yeah, I agree, it's quite nice, quite simple, and pretty good for anyone who likes their American racing cars, and also just open wheelers in general. I'd be interested to get another one of these, and I've also got a semi-started NASCAR kit in the stash. Thanks a lot for watching, please let me know what you think down below, subscribe, like, and I'll see you soon.